then be shared with everyone else. Uh, again, this is for basically high school faculty and staff. We did have some folks who asked to join as well. So there really is no difference with the presentations between elementary, middle, and high. So you can be at any level. We just wanted to make sure we had a dedicated time for each level to ensure that we had enough we had enough positions to allow for the Zoom, so we can take up to about 500 people. So it looks like we're around 80, so we probably won't even hit. We'll probably hit maybe 200 by the end of the meeting, but we did set aside about an hour. Presentation shouldn't be too long. It should be anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes. And then the rest of the time will really be for any questions or comments that the folks may have. So with that said, I want to just go ahead and turn the mic over to our Superintendent of Education, Dr. Ken Swanson, who's going to do our opening remarks. Sir?
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Joe, and good afternoon, everybody. Where I've been speaking about our capacities, and we've been working with budgets here for the last several months, and we know that 6 or 7 years ago, we had over 30,000 students, and now we're down to about 24,000 students. We're between 6,500 and 7,000 students less than we have capacity for. So we're trying to operate and maintain sensibly, and one of the things we're going to have to do is contract our footprint some. But this process is one that my intent is to get us to where our schools are going to be staffed and operating at about between 85 and 90% of capacity. So there's still wiggle room for growth and adjustment as population might change in some of the attendance areas. But at the same time, we need to look at based on a number of factors, and we'll go into those in the presentation, that would cause us to want to decommission several buildings so that we're not having to pay to maintain them and operate them. And so we look at our new budget for the coming year, the utility costs alone are something that is significant. And as we move into an environment when we don't have ARP funding or EFS funding to help out with some of these, we have to be really prudent about how we use our money so that we can make everything operate, run good quality programs for our kids, and get the most use out of the best of our facilities. So with that, that's the underlying thought about why now. The process, we're going to talk about process, we're going to talk about outcomes and what the plan ahead is through the course of the presentation. So we'll probably answer most of your questions by the time we're to the end of that, but we want to also spend time with you and discuss what the options are and the rest of the process and how it's going to go forward. At the end of this work, I'll have a recommendation from the team that's been working on it, and Joe will talk more about that. And then make recommendations. I'll make recommendations to the board about potential courses of action, and it'll be up to them to decide what direction they choose to take us in terms of applying this work. Okay, Joe, off you go. I'll be quiet now. You can present that information.
Thank you, sir. I also want to just recognize a couple of folks who are online with us. We have our Deputy Superintendent for Educational Support and Community Learning, Dr. Bobby Adames. Hi, Doc. And Deputy Superintendent Joanne Camacho. I also like to acknowledge and thank all the principals, high schools, and some middle schools said they will be attending today. So any high school and middle school principals, thank you for joining us. And if there's any elementary, thank you for joining us as well. I'm going to have several members of the committee, the team here. If maybe one of you can just go ahead and post the PowerPoint presentation on the chat. It's the same one from yesterday. Didn't make any changes. So just go ahead, if you can post it on the chat so everyone can reference it. I also sent it to all the principals yesterday, so all the principals should have that as well, and hopefully they shared it with their faculties today. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and begin the slideshow. So here's the need statements as to essentially the beginning of everything that we're doing right now. There's a need to right-size the Guam Department of Education schools and maximize resources, as the superintendent noted, regarding the decline in the student enrollment, and kind of our budget has actually stayed steady. Our short-term goal is first to determine the need, process, criteria, and timeline for the decommissioning of schools in order to right-size the district. Our long-term goal is to implement the process, criteria, and timeline over the next 1 to 3 school years to right-size the district as needed. The overall presentation and the talking points revolve around 3 areas. One is, what is the current situation of the Guam Department of Education? And kind of really explaining the why of everything that we're doing. Because if we're not clear on the why and what's happening and what is the really impetus for all of this, then it kind of makes all of the other steps less clear. Second item is what is the process that we're utilizing and the criteria that is going to be applied and the timeline that we're looking at with regards to the whole effort, the whole initiative. And then 3, what are our recommendations and next steps in terms of moving forward? Now, as we put together, we're called the Committee on the Maximizing of District Resources. And as we've been meeting for about a month, so we got appointed to this committee about a month ago, and I'm the lead deputy on that committee. And we've put together a number of principles that we believe were necessary to guide all of the conversations. Because if these principles are not really understood or followed, then we believe that it would be problematic throughout the entire process. But principle number 1 is understanding that all conversations must start with the understanding that this is a process that must be done due to the current conditions noted, in particular student population trends. And we've asked this of our leaders, we've asked this of the senior management and superintendent, our board members, legislature, and anybody else, is that really has to be kind of the starting point. Is we need to understand that this is something that needs to be done. It's not something that's something that's optional, because quite honestly, quite frankly, if this was optional and we didn't have to do it, we prefer not to do it. I mean, it's such a painful process, and we're all really in agreement that this is, we're in agreement that this is probably going to be one of the hardest, if not the hardest assignment that we've ever had to undertake, the most difficult project, because it is going to be not only logistically difficult, but we know that it does take an emotional toll on folks. Principle number 2 is both internal and external stakeholders must be engaged throughout the process of selection and the implementation of decommissioning plans. So we want to make sure that we engage all of you and all of our stakeholders with regards to this process. We want to be as transparent as possible so that you know what's kind of happening and you know what the thought processes of everybody who's involved. And we already know that sometimes information gets out that may or may not be accurate. So we're going to try and get out information as quickly as possible to you when it becomes appropriate. Whenever there's misinformation that's out there or things that need to be clarified, we're trying to address that as quickly as we can. But really, opportunities like this where we get a chance to speak to you directly is going to be one of our main strategies to ensure that you understand what's actually happening on a regular basis. Principle number 3, part of that engagement is stakeholders need to be made aware of, understand, and provide input into the criteria, and process and timeline for decommissioning schools. The terminology decommissioning schools is one of the actual term, official terminology that's used throughout the mainland when they move towards school closures. So we wanted to make sure we differentiated what we mean by closure versus decommissioning. Decommissioning is actually, putting a school out of commission, out of operations for pretty much a long period of time, and then moving the faculty and staff and students to other operating schools. So we really want to make sure that you understand and provide input to the criteria and process and timeline that we're going to present today. Principle number 4, throughout the process, and this is a tough one that we want to acknowledge, we must respect the history and achievement of all schools and be sensitive to the emotional impact of this process and related decisions. So we get it. We know that a lot of times when we talk about our justifications, we're going to be talking about student population, we're going to be talking about budget numbers, we're going to be talking about the facilities, but we understand that a school is not just the facility, it's not just the the budget. It's not just the student numbers, right? So we understand that there's an emotional human side to this. So we want to be very sensitive to that and respect that. And last one, discussions regarding school decommissioning must include plans for maintenance and or usage of facilities post decommissioning. We may need to recommission in the future as needed. So, one of the concerns that we have is because we're using population trends and we're trying to be as accurate and as clear as we can be when it comes to projecting student population numbers growth or decreasing. But at the same time, we understand that there's going to be some fluctuation. So we're hoping that it doesn't fluctuate drastically within the next 10 years, but there is always a possibility for recommissioning schools. So we don't want these facilities to get worse when they're closed. We want them to actually be available not only for potential future use, but current use. So we want to, engage with other agencies or even other institutions or even the mayors to see what these facilities can be used for if they actually are decommissioned. This is the order of presentations for stakeholders. We've done key division heads recently this past week. School principals have already been through this presentation. Elementary school faculty and staff yesterday. And today is secondary schools. As you know, 2:30 today is high schools, and then at 4 o'clock we'll be meeting with middle schools. Next week will be community presentations, face-to-face and Zoom and on Facebook Live. The last slide here will show the dates and times, but that is how we're going to be rolling out our presentations. So here's the current situation. We're going to kind of just quickly go through student enrollment trends. Building capacities is something that we're currently working on with the principals to make sure that we have those numbers correct. Human resources, budget appropriations, and our education mandates that we need to follow. So here we actually have a 10-year layout of our student enrollment, beginning with school year 13-14, where we started off as a total of 31,593 students. And all the way to 10 years later, we're looking at 24,322, which is a difference of 7,271. This particular graph shows by grade level, elementary, middle, and high. So you're seeing the decrease by level. And then here you see the decrease in total. So you're looking at, quite a bit difference. And that number, depending on the size of the school, 7,000 students, you're looking at anywhere between 8 to possibly 10 schools. Again, closing down larger schools would mean less schools closed. Closing down smaller schools would mean more schools closed. So, 7,000 is substantial with regards to the potential number of schools that could be considered for decommissioning. Human resources at the start of school year 23-24, the Human Resource Division was reporting about 300 plus teacher vacancies. Maximization efforts have actually reduced this number to 60. So that painful process that we actually went through earlier this school year, around the middle and the end of first semester and the beginning of second semester, of maximization and moving folks around and eliminating positions that weren't necessary and so on, actually reduced the number to 60. And even with that effort, we still are, somewhat under capacity. So, what we're thinking is, with the right sizing of the district and the maximizing of our resources, it actually helps really solve our teacher shortage, because we're now able to distribute the teachers that we have more appropriately to where they're actually needed. This shows our fiscal year budget appropriations. The blue column is essentially our request to the legislature for the last 5 years. And then the gray is actually our appropriation. So you really do see a fluctuation, but we just want to make sure that everybody understands that drop in the submission of the Department of Education's request is not because the department got cheaper to run. really just showed that we used to really just show everything that was necessary to hit the 14 points and to hit what the Department of Education needs. But over the last 3 years, our board and our management has really worked hard to have a better understanding of where we fit in the government, knowing that we're never going to get that $300 million amount. I mean, as you can see, we barely get the amount that we request for. However, we have to really do our part to um, be more efficient and be more effective in how we utilize the funds that we get. So you see a steady number over the last 5 years. The last 2 years, you're looking at 31 million, 231 million, 235 million. So we're seeing that kind of trend when it comes to our budget. Education mandates, you're looking at Public Law 28-45. That's the famous Adequate Education Act. Every child is entitled to an adequate education. Our public health inspections, the requirement that we're in compliance with public health regulations and the collective bargaining agreement. So those are three main areas of mandates that we must continue to follow. Our methodology takes into account these areas, who's being affected, the population and community, the logistics, the school building, reassigning areas. So we understand that even though you may have a school that is not going to be up for decommissioning, everybody is still going to be affected, especially if we're going to be moving students around and reassigning attendance areas. And then lastly, how will it impact the community? These are the factors. So if you can imagine, like a big matrix that's going to be utilized, these are the factors that are going to go into the review of every single school. I know that, some of the concerns is, are there already lists of schools and whatnot? The answer is no. There's no list and there's no decisions that have already been made. Every school is going to be reviewed utilizing these factors. I will say, just to clarify, there are documents that are floating around that already exist. So there was a document yesterday that went around regarding, are these schools up for renovations? Are they up for, I forgot what terminology, but those are documents that already exist from the facilities master plan and other reports. So there's no report that exists right now from this committee. These are all previous documents that were utilized under master plans and so on. So really, this is a process that we're going to go through for every single school, utilizing the population, school capacity, and population projection. So just that alone, I know that word went around and people are asking, is it if the school is low population and they're under capacity, they're automatically considered for decommissioning? Well, that's not necessarily true, because part of it may be depending on factor number 4, like your community or your location. Although you may be under capacity and your population may be low, you might be in a location that makes more sense for more students to go to, so it actually brings your school up to capacity. So again, it's not as straightforward as one may think, where, oh my gosh, we're a small school and we're under capacity and we're automatically going to be decommissioned. No, not necessarily, because location actually plays a part of it. Cost is a big part, and cost is kind of related to the facilities master plan, because there is already a cost estimate on how much it would be to completely refurbish a particular school or to address all of their maintenance issues. So again, you might be a school that's at proper capacity, you might be a good location, but if the cost is just prohibitive with regards to fixing the facility, that may be a factor as well. So we do have 2 documents that are throwing around some cost estimates. One is the facilities master plan that was adopted in April 2002. That's open source to the Guam GDOE website. I don't know, maybe I can ask one of the committee members if you can pull up those documents and just maybe put that on the chat as well. I will make sure we send that to the principals so they can just reference that very easily. And then another piece was what's called the squad matrix. The squad matrix actually comes from a report that was utilized in the mainland that had a lot to do with reporting out on facilities, but had a special section on the decommissioning of schools. So that matrix, in conjunction with all of these factors, is going to be utilized for our review when it comes to all of the schools. This is basically the timeline for selection of schools and process for decommissioning. This week is the internal stakeholders, inclusive of administration, faculty, and staff. Week number 2, community stakeholders, mayors, legislature, executive branch agencies. So, we're inviting all the parents and students and, anybody in the community who would like to get more information on this. That will be next week, and we're going to get more information out there. Week 3, the week of April 15th, the Committee on Maximizing District Resources. We're going to be sequestered in a room for 5 days. Basically, is what we plan to review schools utilizing the identified criteria. So we have about 6 to 7 principals on that team, as well as central office division heads, as part of the process, in terms of the review. Week 4, April 22nd, we are submitting our report to the superintendent for his review and final determination. He intends, from my understanding, to share that with the board. So that entire week is meant for him and his process to deliberate, with whoever he needs to speak to. And then we're estimating around week 5, April 28th, to be the announcement of the decisions. So the decision in terms of which schools will be recommended for decommissioning. And then week 6, again, depending on the timeline and so forth with regards to rolling it out, is we proceed with the process of decommissioning. School decommissioning plans, there's sections that these are just a few of the items, because we know that there's a lot of details. So we know that school and student attendance areas is a big factor. Transportation and student records, students, families, engagement, and transitions. We, again, like we said in the beginning, we understand that this is not just a numbers game. It's not just facilities that we're talking about. It's not just, distance. We're really talking about human beings, and we want to be very sensitive to the transitions that's going to have to take place with the students and their families, as well as human resources with the teachers and staff. Just so that you know, we've already had a presentation with the Guam Federation of Teachers, and we've committed to putting together a subcommittee regarding human resources, where we will be working with them on the process of reassigning staff and teachers to ensure that it's fair and ensure that it's aligned with our requirements in the collective bargaining agreement. And then all of the other items are, really operational, the collateral equipment, desk, chairs, and so on, as well as the technology, curriculum tasks, including textbooks, instructional materials, community stakeholders, food and nutrition services, special education. We know that there's a special subgroup of students that may need additional assistance and acclimation to changes that they have in their with their school setting. Warehousing and logistics, if there's a lot of items that need to be warehoused or moved around. Technology services, FSAS has already been engaged with us, and we're going to continue to work with them, as there are a lot of services that the information technology deals with. Maintenance and custodial staff, safety and security, and finances with regards to budget and other resources. So again, as I noted, these are the community informationals. Next week, it's in person, Zoom, Facebook. Again, these are for parents, students, mayors, anybody in the community who would like to participate. Please feel free to share this information. We're keeping the meeting ID number the same. So meeting ID for this session is going to be the same for kind of all of our input sessions. Southern is going to be at Southern High School, Tuesday, April 9th, 6 p.m. They're all at 6 p.m. Central Region, Price Elementary School. Northern Region, Weddingale Elementary School. And again, this is in person for anyone who wants to come in. Zoom, utilizing the meeting ID, and then anybody who wants to watch on Facebook Live. So I know it's a lot of information. I know that it's something that people need to kind of take in, but we want to utilize the rest of today's session for question and answers. You can do it 2 ways, as you guys have been to so many of these sessions before. So you have 2 options. You can write your questions on the chat, and we have folks who are responding in writing to the questions, but we can also read out your question and kind of discuss it with you verbally. Or if you would like to verbally ask questions, and just go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll allow you to unmute your microphone. So we're gonna open the floor for questions now. So just to keep this moving, right? I please interrupt me at any time. Um, but I'm just going to go ahead and go through some of the questions and responses that were asked previously. But please, again, go ahead and raise your hand or go ahead and put some questions on the chat. So we already have one question on the chat. What will happen or be the status of decommissioned schools? So that's something that needs to be discussed again. So as I noted earlier in one of our principles is that as we discuss the decommissioning of schools, we must also include a conversation about what we intend to utilize the school for or what it could possibly be used for. Now, obviously, the decommissioning part would have to come first, and we won't always be solid in kind of like having a final determination of what the school would be used for. But some options include, working with other government agencies who may need facilities. Because, as you know, DOE is one of the only agencies that continue to operate their own facilities. And there's very few. I think it's DOE. I think DPR. Others. I mean, a lot of others rent, right? So really, any other agencies that are renting right now who may need to, have a facility that they don't have to rent anymore, they could utilize one of our schools. Also, mayors. We know that two of our schools that have closed down, FQ Sanchez and JP Torres, there is discussion about possibly turning it over to the mayors to utilize for the villages. So right now, there's no set response or no set answer as to what will happen to the decommissioned schools, but just know that that's part of the discussion. iPhone number 14, will League One areas be redistricted from UMS to BMS as BMS had a decline in the population? They currently attend Untalan, but don't attend Tizan, but attend Ukudu for high school. Right now, we can't answer that. That would all be part of the conversation. But I will say, keep in mind that proximity and location, physical location of the school is a factor as well as population, right? So just because a school is declining in population, that doesn't necessarily mean that that school would itself be up for decommissioning, because we have to consider, does it make more sense to put more students at that school and kind of reassign attendance areas, or vice versa, not the case, just remove the remaining students and have them attend somewhere else. So really, as we mentioned earlier, the decommissioning of a school will not only affect that particular school, but it will also affect other schools, as reassignment of attendance areas is going to be a big factor in the overall decision. This is an island-wide process that is going to be undertaken. Mr. Ray, how do you account for the significant decline in student enrollment from 46,000 to 26,000? So I wasn't around when it was 46,000. 46,000 is actually our total school age population. So generally, the private schools account for about 12 to 14,000 students based on kind of our last. The only reason why we know that number is because we work with the private schools closely when it comes to our consolidated grant. So not all the private schools participate in the consolidated grant, but generally the estimate is anywhere between 12 to 15,000 students go to private school or some other form of school. So I wasn't around when DOE was up to 46,000. DOE at one point in the 90s, I think, was up to 36,000. But what I'm familiar with is when we were in the 31,000 range. So from 31,000 to where we are now, 10 years later at 24,000, I don't know of any study that was conducted as to why there is a decrease, but all the indicators do point to people moving off island, as well as just the decrease in the number of school age children. And that is a surprise. I mean, because really one statement that someone made is, well, people are just having less kids, and I'm like, wow, I never really realized that a lot of the young people I know are having a lot of kids, but I guess just in totality there aren't as many school age children on the island. But the idea is we continue to work with public health and monitoring the what do you call it, monitoring the birth rates, because that's how we project the number of kindergarten students we're going to have. We take, the number from 5 years earlier, a particular date range. I don't know if Dr. Zenny's online, but I know that is definitely one of the ways that we monitor how many kindergarten students we expect to have. Ms. Woolley from JFK, if you're making a decision by April 28th, will this go into effect start of school year 25? The answer is yes. The intent is to implement things by 24-25, but that does not mean every school that's up for decommissioning will be closed by that date. Now, let me kind of explain the two broad scenarios, and we discussed this briefly with the Guam Federation of Teachers. Depending on what comes up with the committee review and of the schools, we understand that there may be a number of schools that we might be able to immediately close them next school year. I'm just going to throw a number out so that we can kind of discuss this. But let's say you're looking at 2 to 3 schools for closure next school year, and then a second phase of another set, and then a third phase. One of the challenges we recognize that might happen with is that might cause students to move 2 or 3 times depending on attendance areas. So we really have to kind of plan that out, because if you're closing or decommissioning 2 to 3 schools, that requires students to move to different schools. And then if you decommission another 3 or 4, it's going to require a movement again. So there is a possibility that students are going to be moving 2 or 3 times within a 2 or 3 year period. So we're really sensitive to that, because we know that that's not an ideal situation. But the other problem is, if we say, okay, well, we're going to eventually decommission 8 schools, are we ready to decommission 8 schools all at once? I don't know. That's huge. That's going to require personnel movement. That's going to be shifting everybody. So really, those are the pros and cons. But the intent is to have a plan in place starting with school year 24-25. Now, again, does that result in everybody being decommissioned and moved at the same time? We're not 100% sure yet about that. Some kids transfers to attend the charter schools. Yeah, Fred, that's true. The thing is, the charter schools are capped. They're capped at 2,000, 2,500, I think, total, right? So I think, for example, GAX is 800. iLearn, I think, is 500. CFA, I think, is 400. And the career tech is like 70. So we monitor the number of charter school populations, and their populations are always maxed out. So we're looking at just 2,000 some students. So yeah, the opening of charter schools could account for 2,000, maybe 2,500 students that have left the DOE. So doesn't account for everybody else, but yeah, that was a factor. Thank you, Carla, for responding on the chat. So just to let you know, again, go ahead and just put on the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, you can do that. But one of the questions that came up was whether or not we were going to be using the facilities for charter schools, right? And the position is, as public school employees and whatnot, is, I guess we weren't very supportive of the idea, right? So the ones who brought up these concerns were not the idea of, hey, just opening up these charters, these schools so that they can become charter schools. Well, the challenge with that is we don't really, although we do have a say in what these facilities are going to be used for, one of the things in the charter school law is that a charter school that opens up, the first thing they would do is, if they need a facility, they would request from the Department of Education and say, hey, DOE, do you guys have any extra facilities that we can utilize for a charter school? And because the charter school is a public school, they are entitled to additional support from the government. So we would respond and let them know whether or not we have any extra facilities. So in our case, we did respond. For example, like JP Torres down south was a facility that we did offer every single charter school, but nobody wanted to use it because nobody wanted to go down to Santa Rita. So at this time, our response has always been, no, we don't have any extra facilities to provide you as a charter school. Now, in the case of when we do decommission schools, we might very well just have some schools that are available. So if a charter school were to open up and ask us if we had any additional facilities, we would probably say yes if those are not being utilized. Another item that was brought up yesterday or the day before was a fluctuation in student population. So that's why we kind of looked at making sure that we had a recommissioning plan, so to speak, or at least be aware that the possibility of having to reopen schools is there. Also, the superintendent has noted that we're not shooting for 100% capacity for every school. We're shooting for at least 80 to 90%. That means we have about 10 to 20% wiggle room. So if a student population goes up by 10 to 20% in every school, we should be able to handle that. But if it does exceed that and we have to recommission and reopen a set of schools, we would be prepared to do that. Michelle Randall. Hi, Michelle. A little while back, there was a conversation initiated by a public servant to return the day of schools to GDOE schools. Was there any movement on that proposed idea? And then Carla responded, as of this moment, there is no movement to return the day of schools students to GDOE schools. That's true, but Dr. Swanson, did you want to just go ahead and comment on that? Because I know you have some current information for us on that.
The bulk of the military kids that would have the rights to attend DODEA schools will fit in the facilities they have. There has been discussion from the DODEA folks about leasing facilities, but that discussion has gone quiet. So there have been a couple things happen with Congress and with the missile defense program that's going to come here, that the deployment schedules are shifting a little bit. So it's still unknown, really. I know we had the admiral down at Navy said that they were going to just buy a school, but no one has come to us with a checkbook. So their offices have looked at 4 facilities, but taken notes on engineering and requirements, but that was over 2 months ago, and they have ceased to discuss that. So right now it's pretty quiet.
Okay, thank you, Doc. And that answers Mr. Perez's question. To any discussion with the possibility of DODEA re-entering our public schools?
They may very well. You're going to have a number of folks in this in the changes that are going on between all 3 services, that you're going to have families who have origins here on Guam, and they're going to want to be in a neighborhood with family members, since they've been deployed elsewhere in the world. So there is an anticipation that we'll pick some kids up because the families really have their roots here and they're looking forward to being back.
Great, thank you, Doc. Other questions included location, attendance areas, and transportation. So the answer is yes, that's a major factor that we're taking a look at. And we understand that even now, as much of the work that was done, several years ago in the reassignment of attendance areas, we still have some situations where folks are attending schools that are way farther from their home than another school, like they're closer to another school, but yet they have to kind of go really, really far, or vice versa. So that is definitely a factor that we're looking at. We're also looking at the topography. For example, even down south, where sometimes it makes sense that this school is next to this school, but there's sometimes mountains in between facilities. So we're also looking at the accessibility from school to school. So all of that is being definitely factored into our discussions. There was a question about cost of refurbishment and libraries, because some of the libraries are getting some work done, as well as equipment in all of our schools and campuses. And yes, so we definitely have that as part of our plan, the refurbishment. contract is moving forward. That's the best we can say right now. We cannot publicly identify the schools yet, but just know that that's all a factor that's being considered when we talk about decommissioning, because obviously if we're going to refurbish a school, it won't make sense to close them down, a year or two later. So we're really trying to make sure that our money goes a long way when it comes to these schools. I have a private message on the side. How does this affect the movement or hiring of school administrators? Will some have to return to the classroom to fill vacancies? So right now, we don't have 100% of the numbers. We do have a lot of the estimates, and based on the estimates that we have now, is all of our existing positions. We don't intend to have people lose their jobs, right? So this is not something where, it looks like people will be having to step down or having to move their jobs. But the idea is possibly having a lot of these individuals in all areas. So we're talking about administrators and nurses and teachers, is move into areas where there's a vacancy. And as you probably know, at every school, there's vacancies throughout the district in all areas. So at this point, we don't think, it doesn't look like there's going to be anybody who has to step down from a position or has to, leave a job because there's so many vacancies in every classification that could be filled. For schools that are decommissioned, would most, if not all, faculty and staff positions be kept as is? E.g., teachers will still be shifted to other schools as teachers, clerks, and counselors. Yeah, so yeah, basically kind of what I said earlier. The idea is folks, moving into vacant positions. So it doesn't look like people will have to step down or lose their jobs or things like that. So and again, we were going to have a subcommittee on this, talking with our Guam Federation of Teachers to make sure that the process is fair and in line with our collective bargaining agreement. But in general, it doesn't look like people are going to have to. It doesn't look like we have an excess of anything at this point. It's moving into vacant positions. Destiny Cruz, oh, that's a tough one. How much would consolidating schools ultimately save the Department of Education? We don't know. We don't have a number on how much it will save, but we do know that it will definitely allow us to stretch the resources and funding that we have now. Again, for example, that exercise that was done, it was painful for some folks, earlier in the semester of moving teachers around and maximizing, classrooms, but that brought the vacancies down from 300 some to 60, really. So, and we haven't even done that yet for school aids. We haven't done that yet for federal aids. We haven't done that yet for one-to-one aids. So the idea of right sizing is really moving the resources that we have. And I know I don't want to overuse the word, but really try to maximize it where we put the resources where they are needed and be able to consolidate resources so that, people can really take advantage of the available personnel that we have.
Well, one of the immediate savings is turning off utilities.
Oh, that too,
And
yeah.
power and water are very expensive, and so that's an immediate benefit right there.
Right.
And
Yeah, I like.
it'll cut our transportation costs as well.
Mhm.
Girl, bite one more time, and then that's it. I'm gonna give you an egg. Excuse.
Thanks. And another thing, we did mention this earlier, but I do want to kind of mention this. There was a question that came up regarding seniority previously, and again, as we mentioned, we will have a separate committee working with the Guam Federation of Teachers to make sure that that process is fair when it comes to how do we handle school decommissioning as well as what are called involuntary transfers. Any committee members, if I'm missing anything, I'm just going off of my notes from yesterday and the GFT meeting, but please, if you have any other questions that you remember I might be missing, please let me know. Okay. Yeah, that's Dylan, can you clarify the number of vacancies across the district one more time? So I only have the teacher vacancies that was provided to us, I think as early as maybe 2 weeks ago, and that number is 60. So 60 teacher vacancies across the district. Now that number may fluctuate because we're always having people leaving, coming, hiring, and leaving. So that number may have gone down or may have actually gone up. How would you work with school buses having to transport students around if they will be required to go to a farther school, considering the current issue of busing? So we haven't engaged DPW yet, but they are aware that we're going through this process, but we're definitely going to have a team member from DPW join us with regards to potential bus routes when we start talking about school attendance areas. So, the idea is um, I don't know. I don't know their entire configuration, but I know what DPW does is they look at all of our schedules on an annual basis. They look at the schools, they look at the attendance areas, and they assign teams of buses based on attendance areas. So they would basically do the same thing as in our process of um, reassigning attendance areas, they would be informed of where we're looking at, and they would develop their hubs based on that. Dylan, what's up, Dylan? Our lease goes up. Oh, Dan, this is actually a really good question, but we can actually make a command decision on this. A command decision, as in, this is just an understanding with the government. Chances are lease schools are not going to be up for consideration. They are now, until we make that final call in, but most likely we've kind of discussed it with the superintendent. It doesn't make sense to decommission a lease school that was just purchased, right? So we have some of our lease schools that we almost own, right? So our guest schools, I think, are up for transfer and ownership around 2026. I'm not sure when JFK is up, and season's a long time from now, right? So, yeah, chances are lease schools are not going to be touched for decommissioning, considering that they are, they are the more well kept schools, and they're kind of up to par. Hannah Gutierrez, don't say anything at this point. I know what you're gonna say, but generally, they're kind of ready to go. So most likely the lease schools will not be up for decommissioning.
I would say they'll certainly be in the formula for making sure that their attendance levels are up and justified.
Right. Will the Ms. Lund, will the decommissioned schools be completely off the hands of DOE? No, no, not because in fact, all the schools are under the authority of the Guam Department of Education. So although they would be decommissioned, they would still be the responsibility of the DOE. So that's why we're saying that we would have to have a maintenance plan. Again, it would be just an example. Let's say they have a decommissioned school, there would still need to be a maintenance plan for that school. We don't want it to be a government asset that goes to waste, which means we might need to have like a minimal custodial crew or somebody just keeps the facility, up and running, right? So, because we know what happens is, when a school's closed down for, a while, like FB was just, closed down for a few months, and there's already deer running through the facility, right? So we want to make sure that whatever school whatever school is decommissioned, that's somehow maintained so that it's an asset that could be utilized by someone. If it is going to be transferred to somebody else, there's an official process for that, and that would have to most likely go through legislation. But it won't be out of the hands of the DOE. It would still be our responsibility. So, folks, I know that like I mentioned in the beginning, we know that this is probably going to be one of the hardest projects that we had to undertake. Mainly because a lot of our schools have a lot of history, and we're sensitive to the fact that especially schools that have been around a long time, especially the schools that are within our villages. you have family connections to the schools, kids and grandkids and great grandkids have gone there. When it comes to faculty and staff, some of us have, spent our lives and our careers working at particular schools. So they really do mean a lot to us. And I want you to know, as with the superintendent, the management team, we do not take this project lightly. We just hope that you understand that we're going to be as transparent as we can. We want to be fair. And we want to make sure that this is all done in the best interest of our students, keeping in mind that this is something that we agree needs to be done. So I'm going to continue to take questions, but I want to just go ahead and release most of the folks who might be kind of good to go. And then the committee and us will stick around for as long as it takes until we're done with all the questions. But I just want to be sensitive to time and release a bunch of folks. So I got two questions here regarding seniority. A similar situation occurred when they opened Southern High and closed Inarahan and Ocean View, but as high schools, but transferred to a school that is already running would be in favor of the current faculty that, let me see how I can read that, already running would be in the favor of the current faculty at that school, regardless if you have 30 years teaching at a school that is decommissioned. So we're gonna, I'm gonna actually take this and I'll probably cut and paste this to one of our discussions with the GFT and kind of make sure that that process is laid out with that subcommittee to make sure that it's as fair as we can. Angelo Andres, hey, what's up, Angelo? Have parents who have kids going to charter schools been surveyed to determine whether they will be sending their kids to our public schools now that most of our schools have been open due to closures and or were in double session? No, we haven't surveyed them, but I think we can work something out with them. Either we come up with a potential metric or we just ask the charter schools. But yeah, that's a good point. The thing is, because the charter schools tend to max out, there's a chance that it would just be a wash, because I don't know if they still have waiting lists, but I know at least I think iLearn and I think CIFA still have waiting lists, and I'm not sure about GACS, and then the new one that just opened up down south, right, with Mount Carmel. A lot of them are public school students that moved over because of some of the things that were happening with we're wondering whether or not schools were going to be decommissioned. But we suspect what would happen is when students leave the charter schools, that their waiting list would actually kick in. So generally, it might be a wash. But that's a good question. We'll take a look at that. Dylan, I know you said that the goal is to keep as many jobs as possible, but how can that be if there are only 60 teacher vacancies currently? How many teachers are you guys anticipating having to move, and how many do you anticipate retiring? I don't know the numbers, and I don't want to estimate, but we do, according to personnel, there is a bunch of retiring. So anywhere within the year, you're looking at 100 to 200 people that move out of the system, right? So doesn't mean it's 100 retirees, but there's always movement at the teacher level. So really, at this point, it doesn't look like we're going to be losing teachers. I mean, even with the vacancies that we have, we still have a number of teachers who are special contract, right? So there are special contract teachers who are retired teachers that have come back into the DOE. So if it really gets to a point where we might be, having certified teachers, I don't know, I just don't see that happening. We've never had that happen on Guam at this point, but there's always teacher movement. So again, with all the vacancies that we have with teachers and administrators and counselors, and I think there's 3 schools that don't have librarians. I'm not sure about nurses, but even with nurses, the thought is that you can have 2 nurses in schools that are larger, right? So really, that's our commitment. The idea is to not have any full-time current individual lose their jobs. Anyone else have anything? So with that said, we're going to stick around again for, I don't know, anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. But for those of you who are kind of good to go, we just want to thank you again for your participation. Please continue to stay engaged and, again, in our efforts to be transparent and fair and in the best interest of the students, we know that this is a conversation that's going to be continuing. Again, next week is our community engagement sessions. Please encourage your parents and students and anybody who wants to get more information or provide input to attend any one of those sessions. They don't really have to be from the South, Central, or North. It'll be open up pretty much to anybody, but we just want to make sure that we had specific opportunities for individuals in those particular areas. So with that, thank you guys so much for your participation. We're going to stay in line for anybody else who has